Greetings from now sunny Southern California. It's Saturday, May 30th. I did one uh, YouTube earlier this morning, but this is more like a continuation of some of the topics I've been hitting on recently this week concerning Last Day's Player. I just had some information stored up, and so this is going to be short but sweet, but I'm talking about Russia and China, which biblically are Last Day's Player. And with all the craziness going on in America, you can see the corruption and the decay in America's stability falling apart from within. So anyways, bear with me as I read a few things here. Is now that 184 countries are grappling with the medical and economic convulsions of China's CCP coronavirus that seems to have originated in a warfare laboratory in Wuhan. What other catastrophes might be headed our way, especially ones we have been forewarned about? What if America's adversaries might start to believe that the United States has a COVID-19 crisis on its hands, and the notion that they might be thinking is that they're distracted. They are looking at their current problem, and so our enemies may see that we are vulnerable at this particular time and want to take advantage of that. They might think that this would be a good time to strike. I mentioned in one of my previous videos about the port cities that the China has, and how that is a definite threat to the sovereignty of our country. And so at one time we were a very strong military might, and being strong helped keep the peace. But I think some of our adversaries are beginning to think that the United States might not be as strong as they used to be. And so that deterrent has emboldened them. They think, well, America might not be as powerful as they used to be. And so last month, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, hope I said that right, said that by the end of 2020, that's this year, Russia will have modernized 87% of its nuclear arsenal, up from its current 82%. Many Americans might shrug this off and think no big deal what Russia's doing, and thinking, hey, we live in an age where we're past that Cold War. Well, they've never stopped enlarging and helping increase their arsenal. The Soviets have been building year after year, steadily for decades now, modernizing their nuclear weapons, where ours are sitting on the shelf, and some of them are hitting that shelf life where it is no good. And so many Americans also might assume that the United States would keep doing what they've always been doing, keeping up with the Russians, or being ahead of the Russians and China, that the United States wouldn't allow this to take place. Well, I beg to differ. If you pay attention, with our last several administrations, there has been a weakening, a demilitarization, so to speak. And so the United States, in fact, remains considerably behind the Russians. For nearly 3 decades after the end of the Cold War, a euphoric United States stopped taking the nuclear problem, the nuclear deterrence for our own safety and protection seriously. And so the current administration hasn't inherited a nuclear lack of capability. Something that's 40 to 50 years old, just like our administration inherited a great void in the necessary things for this virus, because people just ignored it, thought it was good enough, thought it would never happen, and we got hit with the coronavirus. And that's why all the PPE, the masks, and medications were on such a low level of dispersion that, when we fell behind, that's why a lot of people were affected by this particular thing, because we were unprepared. Same thing is true for our military arsenal. The current administration inherited this. And so what we have currently, we have submarines that first got deployed in 1981. That's the year I graduated. The B-52 bomber cruise missiles were launched in 1982. That's one of our most modern things that we have. And with one of our land-based arsenal, the Minuteman missiles, were developed in 1970. And so at present, exactly 0% of America's nuclear platforms are modernized. This is very dangerous for us as the United States. And so we haven't done anything for several decades, and this goes back to the end of the Cold War. In 1991, when leaders in the West presumably imagined that modernized systems would no longer be needed. We won't need this stuff, so why prepare? And so the problem is presidents and Congresses have been warned. The United States has known for some time that Russians are fully modernizing their nuclear weapons. The United States has also been aware that Russians are increasing the role of nuclear weapons in their security strategy, and had also adopted a policy to escalate to win. In this strategy, the Russians would use or threaten to use nuclear weapons early in a crisis based on the assumption that in the face of such threats, the United States would not be able to stand down, or would stand down, because we have nothing to defend ourselves. We can't make even the threat, so to speak. And so several years ago, the commander of the United States Strategic Command, the senior U.S. military officer responsible for nuclear strategy, General John Hyten, told Congress that by 2020, the Russians would have fully modernized at least 70% of their nuclear arsenal. Hyten not only warned about Russia's new escalate to win policy, also took stock of the fact that while the United States had decided belatedly to modernize its nuclear forces, it was still 15 years away from fielding its first modernized nuclear platform. Regrettably, not everyone in the Congress and the nuclear disarmament community listen. And so the policies that came out of this were simply, or talked about, were simply ignored. And so we are been heading for a ground zero towards us. Worse, when in 2017, General Hyten, now the Vice Chairman of the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff, warned of the Russian threat, a common counter-narrative in the United States arms control community and shared by some members of Congress, was that simply by proposing to modernize a then rusting nuclear deterrent, the United States was leading an arms race. Right. Even these critics, however, had to know that it takes years to research, develop, test, and then build highly complex nuclear forces so that no new U.S. nuclear deployments would even be able to start until 2029. An ideological attachment to the arms control catechism of the day, particularly among the advocates of global zero, in other words, we don't want to have any global nuclear weapons, trumped any common sense support of the potential necessity even to use as a deterrent for U.S. nuclear modernization. Instead, what many disarmers proposed was the elimination of more than half the United States nuclear-armed submarines and 100% of America's land-based nuclear missiles and air-launched nuclear cruise missiles, all eliminated unilaterally without the Russians reducing anything. In 2018, nuclear critics in the Democratic Party, now in the House majority, called for the unilateral rollback of the entire ICBM leg of the U.S. nuclear triad, land, sea, and air, to curtail supposedly overly aggressive nuclear strategy by the Trump administration. The proposal appears intended to prevent a presumed expansion of the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Ironically, the Trump administration nuclear modernization effort at that time was nearly identical to the Obama administration's effort, keeping America's nuclear forces strictly within the New START treaty limits. The Trump administration's policy at that time did not seek to expand the United States arsenal by even a singular nuclear warhead. Even today, despite Russia's ever-increasing strength and how large they've gotten, America seems to be collapsing and caving in this particular area. One critic of this whole thing says that Russia has already completed 87% of its arms race, while the U.S. is just putting on its track shoes. The door to the arms race was opened long ago by Russia, not the United States. Think about this. Now, I said all that. I've been talking for like 10 minutes, and like I said before, I don't think the United States is a player a strong player in the last days. And when it talks about the war in Ezekiel 38, it refers to the lions of Tarshish, or the sons of Tarshish. I believe it's those people in the Western Hemisphere, the United States included, that are going to sit back and basically wave our arms and question why Gog or Russia attacks Israel. And so why we don't intervene could be seen here in our lack of ability to intervene and to put our strong no or objection out there with a military might would cause other people to second guess their plans. And so I'm just putting out some information, and hopefully this makes you think about where we are as a country, the United States, in our lack to deter this kind of military threat concerning nuclear weapons. We are far behind, and I'm going to touch on the other technologies that are out there nowadays shortly. Probably sometime next week I'll talk about the AI that's up and coming, and that's a whole mind-blowing thought in itself, and I believe that has a lot to do with the things that will take place after we're out of here, the rapture of the church. But that's all I have for right now. You have a good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. Till next time, God bless you. Keep on keeping on.